you think of 1996, what comes to mind? The Macarena, Summer Olympics in Atlanta, Tupac's death. For me, I think about a lot of things. PlayStation, first car and the freedom that came with that, and a lot of video games. Tonight, we're going to listen to a lot of video game music from 1996, and I'm going to reminisce about the kind of stuff that went on for me that year, and there was a lot. Let's get things going. There's a game that came out for Nintendo 64 in 1996. Killer Instinct Gold. Well, that was Cruising USA. I guess I was unmuted for a lot of that. But hopefully it didn't distract from the music. By the way, you heard Viper Phase 1, which is a game that came out, I believe, in 96. Maybe 95, I guess, but I only saw it in 96 and played it a lot at arcades. I went to a lot of arcades in 96 because, like I mentioned, I had my own car for the first time. There was basically, there's only one arcade within walking distance or bicycling distance. And then there were, gas stations and grocery stores and pizza places that had a few arcade games at best. Yeah, that was Viper Phase 1, followed by Cruising USA. A couple of games I remember playing a lot that year. I spent a lot of my public education career was spent not participating and flunking a lot of stuff, but that particular school year I had decided I was actually going to apply myself, partially just to prove people wrong, because I slept through a lot of classes because I would stay up all night. That might be hard for you to believe, I know, but one of my proudest moments was I don't think I actually flunked art class, but I came really close. I would go to the midterms, and then I would always do well on those in a lot of classes, and then that would make up for it so that I would pass the class. But anyway, that particular school year, I decided I was going to really try. So they had this honor roll type thing that I actually got on, and they were very befuddled because I had proven that I was dumb for a long time, and suddenly, anyway, some people believed in me, including me. But anyway, you as a reward, you got a bunch of like free coupons to local businesses, and I got one of them was for a video rental store that was not Blockbuster, and I just have this specific memory of renting a couple of different games. In 96, I'd been playing nothing but Super Nintendo for years at this point, and almost never playing regular Nintendo, which we still had the console, but I started revisiting. Well, I used the voucher or vouchers, and this particular local place, they didn't have much of a selection of video games, so it was like mostly old Nintendo stuff. So I decided to revisit some games that I had not rented in several years at that point. One of them was a game that I had, my brother and I had rented when it was brand new, and rented a couple of times. The second time we rented it, I actually beat it. But for the first time since that, in 1996, I decided to revisit it, and I rented Mega Man, the original, for Nintendo, and that was it was pretty interesting to play it from a different perspective, but I was still pretty good at it, even though it had been many years. And here's a song from it. Here's Iceman. Well, that was Cosmic Cop. That was an IRIM arcade. Not from 96, but if you listen to this show for a while, you already know that we don't stay really strict to the rules. But I will say, almost every song tonight is from that year, or at least something I played a lot that year. And before that, Crash Bandicoot. It was a game that I rented when it came out for PlayStation. I believe they had Gex, and that was supposed to be like PlayStation's mascot. And then they had Crash. I'm not sure if that one stuck either, really. But I don't remember if I beat that. I probably did, but I remember enjoying it. And Gex is a runner-up tonight, because I did rent that and play it, but I've played that enough on the show before. But it's a fun game, especially because of Dana Gould's voiceovers in it. So I've kind of told this story before, so I'll gloss over most of it. One of the first things that I did when I had a car was picked up my friends and, of course, just drove around. But late at night, we would drive to truck stops and stuff and just play the video games that were there. There was a Subway sandwich place inside of a truck stop. My friends were ordering sandwiches or waiting to order sandwiches, and there were a couple of obvious prostitutes, and they were the old man that was making the sandwiches. They were giving him shit about not wearing gloves and stuff, and one of them was like, well, and I think my friend made some comment like about that they were being mean to him or something, and she was like, well, it's going in my body. And then me and my friend made eye contact, and it was very awkward, and I went out to my car and sat in it because I wasn't ordering food anyway. I was just like, I'm gonna get out of here. And that was the first time I heard Where It's At by Beck. I mentioned that before on the show. Anyway, later that night, after we left there was a series of tornadoes going on in Oklahoma at the time. Of course, I was very used to that, but not while driving. I'd never seen a transformer blow up in the distance. Probably, I don't know if it got struck by lightning or if it was just the power cables colliding and the wind, but it looked like a green light explosion in the sky, and I was like, what the fuck is this? It was pretty scary to all of us. But one game that I played at a truck stop that night was called Aero Fighters.
Look, this is just an informal chat. We were wondering what you were working on in your lab.
Well, I've invented a pill that gives worms to ex-girlfriends.
Right, and what's positive about that?
Well, it's a pill that gives worms to ex-girlfriends.
Well, could it also give worms to ex-boyfriends?
This is a drug for the world to give worms to ex-girlfriends.
Well, great. Thanks for stopping by.
You just don't get it here.
Well, we heard some 3D Lemmings for PlayStation 1. Played that game a lot in '96. And then we heard from Brain Candy, a movie that came out in '96. And then just heard Mustard. And that mustard made someone say, Ugh. It's a game called Ground Seed. It's Japanese. It's a good one. I wish I would have played it in 96, but it came out that year. Well, one of the things that happened that year is I had my first legitimate job. I mentioned at one point on the show that I worked at a flea market. That was my first quote-unquote job. But for legal tax purposes, I had my first real job, which I will say was in manufacturing. And I worked with my friend Mike. And everyone who worked at that place was a character. We had a guy who probably had a coke problem, and he'd say the same shit every day, repeatedly. You ever work with people like that? Every day around the 10 o'clock break, he would come around and there was a Hardee's nearby. He'd say, you can go to Hardee's and get us all some scramblers. So they would do this drawing. I guess it was once a week on Friday or something like that. I don't remember how it worked. I think you put in $1 and then, they just did a drawing and one employee got all the money. It seemed stupid to me at the time, and it still does. Because there were not that many employees, but, I don't know, you ended up with $25 or something. So, one time, occasionally somebody would indulge that guy, and one time I went to Hardee's and got everybody scramblers, and of course, it was more than the amount. It got into my pocket, so I was like, well, I didn't really win anything here. Especially not any favor, any special treatment by these assholes, one of the many other memories of that job, because I could go on and on, there was this old fucker who got hired because he was a relative, which is, that's something that happens at small companies, but this old man got hired and put in charge of the department that Mike and I were in, and he was extremely annoying, and he became someone that I would impersonate quite a bit. And part of my grandpa character that I do, what's that? He had no idea what the fuck was going on at any time, but the one thing he did know was how to tell these young whippersnappers what to do. And one time I was making fun of him, and he was right around the corner and heard me. But of course he didn't say anything about it to me directly. He just passive-aggressively tried to get me fired. And eventually he did. Me and Mike, I think. Anyway, one of my memories from that job, other than that, was I would always bring cans of Coke or Sprite or Dr. Pepper. Back then I almost never drank water. And that was my hydration for the day. It was cans of soda. And I put them in the break room fridge. Which it wasn't really a break room. It was just part of the warehouse. So the people that worked in that area, including the cokehead guy, they were just always around it. And I went one day I went in there and it was either a 7-Up or a Sprite. And I put it in there and it was gone. And I was young and naive, and I just thought, man, what kind of asshole would just take someone else's can of soda from the company fridge? Since then, I've learned a lot of assholes would do that. That was a learning experience for me. Well, I talked about the local video rental store and the Nintendo games. Another one that I rented around that time, possibly at the same time as Mega Man, was a game that I've still never beaten without cheating. And believe me, I've tried. It's a Nintendo game that I also rented when it was new with my brother, and we tried really hard to beat it. Didn't even get close at that point. I got closer in 1996, and I got really close on New Year's Eve of 2009. Well, going into 2010, it's Street Fighter 2010. And I specifically remember this song that I'm going to play because, speaking of trying hard at school, I was participating in a competition. While I was doing this, this song was going through my head the whole time. Street Fighter 2010. I think that's level 3 or 4, but it's called Rooted.
Bill, what does that look like to you?
Delicious mountain freshness?
No, seriously. What does that look like?
Cool, refreshing springtime in a glass?
No, come on, look at it. What does that really look like?
Liquid sunshine?
There you go. Liquid sunshine.
Mountain Dew. It looks exactly like liquid sunshine.
Well, we heard Saint Dragon followed by a clip from the Dana Carvey show, which happened briefly in 1996. That was a Mountain Dew advertisement that they did, in which if you couldn't figure it out, was implied that it looks like piss. They had a new sponsor on every episode that they would make fun of. That was a fun show to watch with my dad and my brother. Had some people involved in the writing and performing that went on to do a lot of other stuff. If you're interested, I think probably every episode is on YouTube with a shitload of ads injected into it that maybe if you have an ad blocker that works, you can deal with. But anyway, there's also a documentary about it. I think it's called Too Funny to Fail, something like that. I recommend it. It's pretty interesting and amusing. Anyway, that was a highlight of that year. Anytime I watched anything with my parents that involved belly laughing, it's a good memory, you know? And then what we just heard, Ketchup, Raiden 2, that was a game that they had at the arcade that I would drive to in Oklahoma City. Fun fact, every time I go back there, which is not very often, it's still there, and it's usually not working properly. Usually the joystick or one or more of the buttons does not work. But hey, at least it's there, you know. I played the shit out of that back in the day, and that was one of the first games I had for PlayStation, was the Raiden Project, I think it was called. They had 1 and 2 on it. I used to play that on PlayStation with a good friend of mine at the time. One of the things that me and him would do, other than prank call, and he had a great sense of humor. Speaking of belly laughing, he was one of those people that laughed out loud a lot, especially at things that I would say and do. Yeah, it's always fun to have a friend like that, you know. We had this thing, me and him and most of my friends, which was not that was a lot, but, you know. We would sneak out at night and steal things out of unlocked cars. Something dumb that teenagers do, you know. And hopefully you grow up and get past that, but we would steal mainly change out of cars. And on a good night, sometimes some people would leave cash in their cars, and on some nights we'd get like $60, I remember, and we always just divided it up. And then I would buy something with that money, and my dad would see it, and he'd say, "Where'd you get money?" Anyway, it was the very end of 1995 or beginning of 96. It was on the Christmas break, and we got some really cool stuff that we stole from people out of their unlocked vehicles that they would park in the street, mainly. And I remember this one thing that we got. One thing. Skin bracer. No, it was not Skin Bracer. It was one of those megaphones. If you remember in Living Color, David Allen Greer would do a all monitor character. And I think we had a guy like this at our school, actually, that you could press buttons on it and it would play stupid little songs, monotone type songs, you know. Anyway. stole one of those out of a car, and we thought that was really cool. And then I remember bringing it home that night and thinking, I think, in hindsight, of course, I think, but at the time I was thinking, that seemed like a cool person that we stole this from, probably. And then I just felt really bad about it. And I started thinking, I kind of felt like a piece of shit, you know? It ended up being an interesting experience because I've had a few of these throughout my life. Kind of end up believing in some kind of higher power because I thought about that I'm a piece of shit and maybe I should stop doing this. And then the very next time that I did that with my friend, we got arrested. We had a bunch of stuff in our pockets that we'd stolen out of cars, and there was a school that we walked behind on our way back home to our respective houses. And it just so happened that someone had broken into that school and there were police going around the perimeter of it. The alarm had been set off. We had heard an alarm, and we thought it was a car alarm, but it turns out it was the school that we were nearby. All I saw was a light shining in my face, but apparently I had a gun pointed at me from this cop. And anyway, we got arrested. And I think I realized, like, maybe I should have listened to that voice that was telling me I'm a piece of shit, you know? So, I have a specific memory of a game, a brand new game that came out around that time after I'd been arrested. And I was anticipating court because who knew what was going to happen. And I rented this game and I was playing it and I'm like trying to enjoy it, but I couldn't stop thinking it was like 3 or 4 months in between getting arrested and the court date, and I was just worried about it the whole time. So I remember playing but not enjoying this game, and I will never not associate it with that feeling. Mega Man X3, worrying about my court appearance for Super Nintendo's Mega Man X3. Here we go. little bit of Yuzo Koshiro for you there. That's Sarcarian. For that, Castlevania Belmont's Revenge for Game Boy. You know, one thing about 1996 I can't not talk about. It was the year that I came into possession of a Commodore 64, and man, did that have an effect on me. It was borrowed, quote unquote, like so many other video games, but this wasn't a video game, it was a fucking computer, you know? But with it came a lot of 5 1/4 floppy disks of video games. And the coolest one that this friend of ours had, whom I was borrowing the computer from, was a game that, and I gotta tell you, before I play this, I spent a lot of time preparing this, and I wanted to play it on the show before, and I haven't, because it's one of those songs that a lot of people upload to various places on the internet, and someone uploaded a rip of the music, and it's not accurate. The very last solo note before the song starts over, so many people have uploaded where the note is like it's one step too low. It's out of key. I would maintain that it's not an artistic choice by the composer. There's a vibrato effect on it, and I think that has something to do with emulating the music, but when you played it on the Commodore, it was hitting the correct note. And I finally found, well, actually I found an emulation of it on Archive, so I had to take this song and edit it together with a recording that I personally made of playing the emulated version on Archive. I edited in that specific part, and I think I did pretty good, or, you know, it lines up pretty well. I had to edit out some audio skips, or some dropouts, but anyway, all that to say that this game was really fucking cool back in the day, in the 80s, when they had a computer. These people down the street from us ended up being friends of ours, and then not, eventually. It's a game for Commodore 64 called Paperboy.
But I think back there's always the germ in my mind. That's where I'd end up on the silver screen. And you got the face for it too, darling.
You know, I want to try that less is more kind of acting, where you just, when you're talking to someone, you close your eyes and then you look at them when you're not talking to the person. I mean, you open your eyes when you're looking away, but then when you talk to the person, you go like that. And you open your eyes and then you look back at the person, but you never open your eyes when you're talking to them.
That's a bit of Timothy Fallon, I think, there. From the Nintendo Entertainment System. That's Wolverine. Before that, we had a clip from Waiting for Guffman involving two no longer with us comedy legends, Fred Willard and
Catherine O'Hara.
R.I.P. That's all I can say right now. Can't get into that too much. Before that, we had Space Megaforce for Nintendo. I mean, Super Nintendo. Sorry. Super Aliste in Japan. Well, if you're wondering how things turned out with that court appearance and all that, I got sentenced to a lot of community service. My friend, at the instruction of his mom, blamed everything on me, and I guess she presented such a case at his court appearance, which happened before mine for some reason. I got the fullest longest and hairiest arm of the law thrown at me. So I had to do a bunch of community service, and there was a military program going on at the time, which I'm sure is not going on now. And when you hear about that, you'll probably know why. In a nutshell, it was cool at first. Like, I was kind of enjoying it, doing drills and marching and all that shit, physical training. But then there was like, they did these camping trips, and there was this guy who, by the way, was not in the military. He was just like a guy that volunteered off the streets for this thing. Like, hey, I'd like to spend some time with some kids. And he, at this camping thing, like, we were all supposed to have our own tents and stuff, and he was trying really hard to get people to sleep in his tent with him. Anyway, my parents caught wind of that, and, like I said, I had my first legitimate job, and my parents are like, "You're going to hire an attorney about this." And they knew one, and I did. And, I didn't have to keep going to it, because I told him about this guy. It's a program that I'm very sure is not still going on, like I said. And it was a good thing I was underage, because I was not charged as an adult for this petty larceny, whatever you want to call it. But it was, you know, I had so many learning experiences in that year. And the community service I ended up doing was at the animal shelter. And I actually enjoyed that. It was kind of a fun experience. I mean, it wasn't great. I'd rather not have been there, but I liked dogs. And there was a cat named Rufus that I bonded with. That, well, I thought of him as George Carlin from Bill and Ted, you know. Thought about adopting him. Old cat. But there were dogs that I got along with pretty well. Then there were a couple that I did not. I had to feed the dogs, and I had to clean up their poo-poo. And I remember there were like a couple of dogs that I went and talked to the lady that was running the place. I was like, "This dog looks like he's trying to attack me," and she's like, "Just hose his turds under the fence. Just hose him across to one of the other kennels, and then you can scoop it up from there," which I did. It was not horrible. I served my time to the community and all that shit. And it was a weird time too, because like I said, I had that job. So I would go to work for 8 hours, and then I would immediately go to that community service for 4 hours, and then go home and be so tired that I couldn't do anything else. And that's how I spent that entire summer of 1996. Except for those couple of times when I was hanging out with prostitutes at the truck stop, you know? Here's a game that came out in 96, and I played it a lot more after 96 than I did in 96, but it came out in 96, and maybe you've heard of it. I played it when it came out on PlayStation with my cousin, and I remember getting to this final stage and really enjoying the music. It's Metal Slug, and here's the music from the final stage, which sounds like it's from a TGIF ABC sitcom from the 90s. Yeah, that was from a game called Turf Masters. It's a Neo Geo joint. One thing I wanted to mention that I can't skip over. In the fall of '96, when my parents finally had cable, there was a show that we discovered. They would put out a best of episode for an upcoming season. It was called Mr. Show, and I first saw Mr. Show that year. Screwballs was the first sketch I saw. It was a parody of Love Connection with Chuck Woolery, with Bob Odenkirk playing a Chuck Woolery type character. And I thought it was stupid. And then that same best of episode came on again, and my brother and my mom watched it with me, and we laughed. And then I thought, maybe this show is funny. Maybe I'm allowed to laugh at this. Anyway, the rest is history. It was quite influential on me. Quite. And that's about it, folks. I had one more song I wanted to play for you. The aforementioned competition in which the song from Street Fighter 2010 was in my head. We were staying at a hotel, and there was a dance of sorts for this particular school. And there was a girl that I had a big crush on, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't go to this dance. I was too awkward. I didn't know what to do with myself if I went to a dance, you know. So instead, I hung out in the lobby at the hotel, and I heard music that sounded kind of like what we're about to hear. And, let's hear it. Street Fighter Alpha 2. Well, thanks for listening, folks. I hope your 2026 is as enlightening as my 1996 was. There's so much that went on that I can't even... I tried to brush upon the subjects like Mr. Indiana Jones brushing away at those fossils, you know? That's the best part of those movies, when he's brushing at those fossils for 10 minutes at a time. Anyway, R.A.P. Catherine. Gosh darn it. Thanks for listening, folks. It's a new season of Oops All Video Game Music. We're gonna leave you tonight with a song from 1996 from a game called Viper BTR. Doubtful Woman. I don't know where they got this title from. I've certainly never experienced that. Eh? Thanks for listening, folks. We'll see you next week. And until next time, I'll be your wingman anytime.